those who are metaphysically minded, and Greek mystery methods to the artistic, because the Greek invocations depend upon music and movement for their efficacy. Efficacy. That's a weird word, that. A weird word. These three systems form the primary basis of our Western tradition. They also represent its most highly developed aspects, but for all practical purposes they present many difficulties in the employment, and people who try them usually get only partial effects unless they are very advanced workers or have a special natural aptitude and affinity for the particular tradition according to which they are operating. The reason for this is not far to seek. None of these methods have been naturalized in our islands, and we cannot therefore find a holy place at which to pick up the contacts in a prepared atmosphere where the veil is thin and the foot of Jacob's ladder rests upon earth. Now let's read that again. These three systems from the primary basis of our Western also represent the most highly developed aspects of all practical. Alright, these three systems. The reason for this is not far to seek. None of these methods have been naturalized in our islands, and we cannot therefore find a holy place at which to pick up the contacts in a prepared atmosphere where the veil is thin and the foot of Jacob's ladder rests upon the earth. And that's exactly what we have here. As we cast our minds back to that faithful, well, I mean, I say that fateful day, it's more complicated than that. Blessed Boudica and those brave men and women as well. I'm sure that, you know, tough girls around here, believe me, they still exist. You know, the Celtic people still exist. I mean, I lived in a port town for about 15 years or so. Those guys wandering around with blue tattoos, mate, you just want to keep walking. Just walk on. That's all I'm saying. And the women, but yes, it's almost entirely dead. Druidry is, for all intents and purposes, almost entirely cosplay, although I do respect it. It's wonderful that people are trying to, you know, bring these things back. But there's no substitute for direct contact with an archetypal force that still has enough peace and still has enough resonance within the, what I'm saying is, it's like an oasis, a kind of, you know, a small pocket of resistance that its attributes are so subtle that even the disturbance of the, you know, the road and all this kind of stuff, even with all that going on, there's still enough left there in the countryside, so extremely subtle and undisturbed by the mass psychosis of modernity. Yes, these places do exist still, and long may they live. Where was I? Moreover, the racial subconsciousness, although it contains all the elements represented by the exotic gods and goddesses, for we are not made of special and peculiar clay different from the rest of mankind, does not contain the symbols that evoke them in the form in which they have been built up in the racial subconscious of the races that were habituated to their daily uses as objects of adoration. It is only because these races are dead and gone and their cultures have passed away that we can use their symbols at all. For if the system were a living system, it would automatically exclude us from its penetralia unless right of entry had been conferred upon us. It is for this reason that we can never operate a living system of magic effectually unless its degrees have been conferred upon us. The voodoo and the tantric systems are closed systems to the European, but the Egyptian and the Chaldean are open systems, which anyone may operate who can, because their priests are dead and their temples stand open to sun and wind, and there is no one to guard their mysteries from profanation, save the intrinsic powers of those mysteries themselves. These, however, are a quite effectual guard for all practical purposes. For though they cannot prevent the blasphemer from having his first bite, as it were, he seldom has a second, for the powers he has invoked and profaned destroy him. But why should we esteem an outraged deity a devil? Because a misused force reacts on the user. It is not necessarily a force of evil. Has no one ever taken a poisonous overdose of a drug, or received a shock when he touches the wrong switch, or miscalculated the temperature of an object and burnt his fingers? If we banished from human use as dangerous every object or substance that had ever, under any circumstances, proved noxious, we should exist in a vacuum. Yeah. These powers, however, duly approached with reverence and understanding, and after purification demanded for their worship, can still exert their ancient influence over the worshipper, blessing and illuminating him according to their nature and his capacity for response. These great potencies thus approached have infinite possibilities for good to exercise upon human consciousness and social life, and especially is this the case in our modern urban civilization, where the nature contacts have been lost and forgotten. Yeah, almost all of them. And in consequence, the subconscious minds of men and women are as foul as unclean stables. We need the light and air of conscious attention to be directed to our subconscious fastnesses, and the clean broom of spiritual sanctification to make a clean sweep of their accumulated rubbish and refuse. There is nothing in human nature which is intrinsically unclean, St. Augustine notwithstanding. But there is a very great amount which will go septic and putrefy if we thrust it below the level of consciousness and sit upon the lid, which we most definitely have. It is a false concept of human nature which has developed so much that is worst in human nature. When we deny the natural side of our natures, we are like a woman who will not clean a stopped sink because it is too dirty to touch. It is only dirty on account of the way she has kept it. It may be unpleasant to handle when first it is taken in hand and cleared up, but once clean, it need never be allowed to get into that condition again. But it will certainly be a source of poison to the whole household until it is taken in hand. The pagans were right when they deified and sanctified all aspects of nature and of human nature. The Romans even adored Cloaca, the goddess of sewers and scavengers, and they were far cleaner and more sanitary in their habits than the generations who succeeded them, and whose saints refrained from washing out of love for God. We need to bring back reverence for natural things and respect for the body and its functions, and adore God made manifest in nature, even in the form of the goddess Cloaca, if we are to have any real health of mind, body or estate, and return as prodigals to the bosom of our great mother, where alone is to be found healing for the diseases that arise from too much civilization and too little sun and air. Now fuck off.